All right, let's get into it. So a few people have been asking questions as they look around the planet and realise things are a bit weird. Um, so I want to just give an overview of actually how the planet is structured and where power is and decisions are made and influence. I want to talk about who we refer to as they. Often in conversations say, oh, but they don't want us to do this and they stop us from doing that. And I've always wondered, who the hell are they? Certainly the government, your local government, state government, federal government. There's too much of it, in my opinion, but certainly they have an influence. But depending on, it doesn't matter who sort of ends up being elected, they might do certain things, but really our lives don't get changed much. They seem to be fairly much on a pathway that's set before us that we don't have too much say in. And what I've noticed, I've lived overseas in a couple of different countries, I've noticed that, let's say, for example, the education system will start adopting the same ethos and methodologies and sort of educational approaches from one country to another all at the same time. And it's like, hang on, aren't they meant to be independent sort of institutes doing the right thing as their country wants them to do? But you start to see that things happen all around the world at around the same time. I want to show you a graphic here to just try and, basically it's a pyramid, and it very much is a pyramid system that we are in, and we're nowhere near the top. So what we have here, this is us down here. These are the minions, of the people, and make up billions of people on this planet. Now at this level that we can see, we've got the governments, your intelligence community in Australia, it's ASIO, and federal police, your military, your police, courts, prisons, these schools over here, very important, your religions. These are all stuff that are visible to us that we can, we integrate with it on a daily basis, part of our day-to-day lives. Now, above them are your large corporations. So your governments have influence, obviously, but there is actually more pull amongst these big pharma, big oil, your tech companies, DuPont, I think, ceramics and stuff like that, paint, Dulux, I believe, come out of them, your big auto companies, that sort of thing. These guys actually can dictate to our governments what's going on, okay? And there are actual laws and legal processes in place so that this actually happens. Sitting above them, you have your financial control. Okay, so your central banks, and we'll get into that more, but largely all around the world up until recently, central banks have been privately owned. A lot of people assume that the Federal Reserve of America or the Reserve Bank of Australia are the people's asset. They're not. They're centrally owned. They're privately owned, and they actually dictate to the governments what interest rates will be. They work closely with these guys to manipulate things to turn out the way they want, and that's all about getting money back into here. Okay, these they call think tanks are your secret societies, so like your Freemasons, your Skull and Bones Club, which all the Bushes are a part of, a heap of people. I think every US president is a Freemason. I'm not sure that Trump is. His father may have been, though. But these, certainly at the top levels of these, are very influential people involved with all of these financial and corporate entities. And they literally, very, very, very wealthy people, they do some pretty funky things behind closed doors. I don't want to freak anyone out too early on, so we'll get to that later on. Now above them is what's called the Committee of 300, which sits below the Crown Council of 13. Now this is what we'll get into, is these 13 families. You can't really read it, the world's richest, most powerful families. There's a reason there's 13 of them. If you think of Jesus and the 12 apostles, there's 13 of them. And we'll get into that shortly. The world monarch and the all-seeing eye, which you find on US currency, and you see symbology for it everywhere. Basically, you would consider this to be the God, if you like, the Godhead. For these people, it's not what we consider to be God or good people. consider to be God. It's the dark side. The world monarch is an interesting study, and it's largely due to some key people here that all of this is starting to be disrupted and upset, and people are starting to be held accountable. This committee of 300 would include people from the 13 families and high-ranking people from these think tanks if they're not part of the 13 families, and potentially some people from down here. You can do a lot more research on this stuff, but this is how we're set up, and this is where we are. George Carlin, very good comedian, maybe in the 70s or 80s, something like that. And one of his lines was that it's a big club, and we're not part of it. So let me just get out of there, if I can. And let's talk about these 13 families. Okay, look at me go. I'm just learning this software, so just bear with me. So, talk about the Illuminati. I'm sure you've all heard of that. You hear about the cabal, you hear about the deep state. We can go into more of those terms later on, but Illuminati is, I think it came out of Bavaria, somewhere like that, which might have originally been Austria or Germany or somewhere like that, the Bavarian Illuminati. But these are the 13 families that essentially run the world and work together. They all have different agendas, but they all work very much closely together. Some of them are more powerful than others. They vie for power with one another. In amongst these 13 families, there are about 8,500 people, apparently. This dude, Fritz Springmeier, is pretty much, he's the definitive sort of expose of these families and who they are. When you go further back, there's actually different family names. They change their family names over history so as to avoid people working out what's going on, I suppose. For example, the royal family changed their name. They were a German surname and changed it to Windsor, I think after the First World War or just before the First World War, something around there. The key one, these guys obviously are Chinese-based, but they have got huge influence. China is a massive influence, and while China wouldn't consider themselves to be Illuminati or anything like that, they're all got the same agenda. They're all working with one another. And that's not the Chinese people, that's the Chinese Communist Party, an evil regime. There's some really good stuff that you can find on that. These guys here are your bankers, and I'll maybe leave a link to a really good explanation of how they established so much wealth and were able to basically take over the English royal family, for that matter, and the whole banking system, which has bled down through the USA, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and then they have implemented the same central banking system around the world. If you go back further and further and further, you might find that many wars around the world where apparently evil regimes have been overcome and replaced, those evil regimes were probably trying to keep the Rothschilds out of their banking system. So the Rothschilds utilised generally the US military. They make an excuse to go in there and overthrow the existing government, and then put in their puppeteers, and they implement their own central banking system. The Rockefellers, very big in pharmaceuticals and in education, and very much, you look at who these families donate their money to. They're donating them to because they're good people. They're donating them because they want them to put in the agenda that they want, which is basically to bring the world together as a one global population. So take away nations, take away sovereignty, something we can talk about down the track, and basically run us all as the one big mass of people, and take what they want as they want to. I'll just get out of there. So there's evidence left, right and centre as to what these jokers are up to. And part of their sort of belief structure is that they have to tell us what they're doing, and they do so regularly, but we don't really take it seriously sometimes. So this is David Rockefeller, and these are his memoirs. You can read, obviously, but some believe we're part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterising my family and me as internationalists, or we would call them globalists now, and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure, one world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty and am proud of it. So fairly pointed words. And it is basically what they're trying to get into place at the moment. And this is their time to do it. And it's not working too well for them, hence why everyone's sort of up in arms as to what's going on. Now, I'll just try and get out of here like that. And, whoops. So, yeah, it's heavy stuff. If you're not already aware of that, you would have heard of some of these different families. The Kennedys are JFK's family. JFK went rogue, essentially. He wasn't up for it. He wasn't going to go down that pathway. Or his brother. There are other members of his family who are more than happy to dip into what these jokers were up to and are up to. Let's have another quick look at this. The Merovingian bloodline. So these all sound like pretty normal, regular day names, which they are. But when you go back behind these guys, I'm not sure if Fritz Springmeier covers it in his book, that they're much more sort of old school, like ancient names. But the Merovingian name is apparently the bloodline that intercepted Jesus' bloodline. So like I said, think of the 12 apostles and Jesus. That's where your 13 comes from. That's why 13's a very commonly referred to number and used number. There's no 13th floor. Their symbology and numerology is massive. But yeah, apparently they intercepted Jesus' bloodline, and so this one is a bloodline of Jesus, because that's what they're trying to actually overcome, is the good in the world that Jesus represented. His story is another story. It's that's been sort of changed around and misled us a little bit. Sorry, I'm just getting used to all this. And that's stuff we can go into deeper. I just want to give you an overview of how we're set up, where we are, and why we just don't seem to have any say in what the hell goes on. So yeah, that's that. If you can get your head around that, those 13 families have been pretty much running the show. There are more people behind them at a higher level, which will just too much to take in at the moment. And what, again, like I said, they must tell us what they're doing, and they really kind of rot in our faces through the UN. So these different alphabet agencies, UN, NATO, APEC, OPEC, blah, 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 all those alphabets agencies you get, they're all sort of operating with one another and working in the interests of those 13 families. This is your UN Agenda 2030, the one world government, one world cashless currency. So with a press of a button, you can have nothing, basically. Whereas when you've got a cash currency, you can actually keep cash or precious metals and trade with them. But in a cashless currency, we are all at the mercy of someone with a mouse and a computer. One World Central Bank, which they've been working hard towards for a long time, but that's been intercepted and that's going to fall apart. The military, end of national sovereignty, and this is basically any sort of pride in your own country and your own culture out the window. End of all privately owned property. Excuse me, this gets me a little upset. I'm not upset, I'm just having a cough. But the end of the family unit, which is what Satanism and communism is all about. Depopulation, they want less of us. Mandatory multiple vaccines. As it stands in the Constitution, we cannot be forced to take any sort of medication we don't want. You can't. Our body is a sovereign thing. They can take away our privileges, which they control, which they may well try to do if they're successful with all this virus concerns. basic income. So basically, you'll get X amount of money, and that's it. No matter how much harder you work, how much smarter you work, you can't earn any more money. So you've got what you've got. You can't own your own property. It's communism. Microchip society for purchasing, travel, tracking, and controlling. So if you're not microchipped, you can't go anywhere. You can't buy anything. Social credit system like China has. So China's sort of leading the way here, but it's all falling apart for them at the moment, and we can get into that further down, or I can point you in the right direction. Government raised children. It's already happening in the US and other places where the schools don't want the parents to know what their kids are being taught, quite literally. Kids are being taught about pedophilia being a legitimate sexual orientation. This is happening now I believe in Texas and possibly in California. The schools are actually pushing this on kids. What they're doing is grooming the kids for pedophilia, essentially, because they go into sort of graphic sexual content for prepubescent kids. And they don't want parents to know, so they want to take out the family unit, the end of the family unit. Government-owned, controlled schools, colleges, universities, they pretty much are at the moment anyway. No more owning your car. You just public transport anywhere you need to go. Everyone's like in China, all those Chinese corporations, businesses that do business, so they answer to the party. So they do what the party tells them to do. They're not in it for profit per se. They're in it to implement the agenda of the Chinese Communist Party, who are possibly the most evil regime the planet's ever seen. They make the Nazis look like Boy Scouts when you really learn what's going on there. Non-essential air travel. I mean, this stuff's getting a bit easy. Some of this stuff earlier. Human beings concentrated. Cop that word. Concentrated into human settlement zones. Think of New Zealand at the moment, where you're being taken to camps. You're not allowed to leave unless you do X, Y, and Z. It's just illegal. You can't force people into basically a concentration camp when they haven't done anything wrong. And to private farms, obviously, single-family homes out the window. They're already trying to, in California, implement legislation where you can't build a freestanding home. But they're trying to basically herd people into community homes, restricted land use. They don't want us out in nature. They want us in cities, and basically in our cells doing the work of our worker bee work. Ban of natural non-synthetic drugs and naturopathic medicine. So this is the pharmaceutical angle. There's so many natural medicines out there that do wonders for people and have people constantly spruiking them, but it all gets shut down because you can't make money out of just good healthy eating and stuff like that. They need to get you addicted to their opioid-based medications and other things, and that's a nice little. And the end of fossil fuels, meaning basically we become serfs. So that's the UN agenda, okay, for 2030. 21 is irrelevant. All these numbers are relevant too for these people. So some of this stuff's pretty heavy, and a lot of people just can't see it. They won't see it. They refuse to see it, and that's okay. All I ask, if you are watching this and you think I'm an absolute crackpot and this is all conspiracy theory, it is conspiracy, absolutely. It's not a theory. It's happening. It has been happening for thousands of years, and now is the time. All the ancient scripts talk about it, all the ancient texts of the Bible, but I'm not sitting here saying everything in the Bible is great and good and should be followed. It's been manipulated to suit these people's agenda. So all I would ask is, if you're watching these shows and you think I'm a nut job, that's fine. Don't stop watching it, yeah? If you've got questions, please, I think you can put them in the links below, these will be in the comments below. And if there are people who genuinely want me to expand on something, I will go as far as I feel confident going, but I'll also let you know when I don't really know what I'm talking about, or if something's too in-depth. Everything is really in-depth. I'm just trying to give you an overview, but you can do your own research, and I encourage you to please do your own research and come to these conclusions of your own. I'm just trying to point you in the right direction as to where you can maybe go to get that more of that clarity. But you need to be able to think for yourself, and you need to be able to challenge your own mindset. If you're not prepared to challenge your own thoughts and beliefs, then you don't really have, in my opinion, you don't really have the right to be challenging someone else's. So one of the things I've noticed through all this craziness is the sort of erosion of free speech. If I'm fairly outspoken and I hold some opinions that are largely different to the mainstream, but that a lot more people by the day are starting to come around to. So if you don't like what I've got to say, that's fine. But most important is that I have the right to say it. And same with you. I may not appreciate what you say, and I might not think it's true at all. But if you're delivering it in a responsible and safe fashion, respectful and safe fashion, then I'm all for it. You go for it. It's your absolute right. I'll just throw a couple of thought-provoking statements at you here. Must always be willing to truly consider evidence that contradicts your beliefs and admit the possibility that you may be wrong. I love this. Intelligence isn't knowing everything, it's the ability to challenge everything you know. And it takes courage too, because we all like to know what's going on. Act like, well, I know what's happening. You have these big conversations and debates, and then this, and this person's this, and they're just this, and in actual fact it may not be anything like that. You've got to challenge yourself, and this is sort of along the same lines. Leo Tolstoy, if you want to know who he is, you can look him up. The most difficult subjects can be explained to the most slow-witted man if he has not formed an idea of them already. The simplest thing cannot be made clear to the most intelligent man if he is firmly persuaded that he knows already, without a shadow of doubt, what is laid before him. So, and I have some very, very good friends who I got all the time in the world for and all the respect in the world for. Very intelligent, very, very well educated, and they're the most sure of their stance, and they've got every reason to be sure of their stance. But they're clearly the hardest people to get to come around and consider something that's outside of the box that they've decided everything is right in. And I was there myself, don't worry about that. It's not like I've been onto this since I woke up. That said, I've always been wary of the name Rothschild ever since I can remember as a little kid. And then when I noticed the term Rothmans cigarettes, and I knew how damaging cigarettes were, it's crazy. I've smoked. There's no drums. I'm not judging anyone for that, but the fact that it's so well promoted and the health issues that come out of it, that then require people to go into hospitals and onto medications and basically just get sick from it. I'm like, this looks sus. It's like, why would you do this to people? Just hand them all this stuff and get them addicted to a useless drug, really. It's not like people, I've never had heroin or anything like that, but I assume if you shoot up, you have a pretty good time while you're high, But with the cigarettes, it's almost like you get addicted to them. It's hard work to get addicted to them, and then you can't get off them. They're so addictive, but they just allow you to keep functioning and shorten your life, from what I can see. But that's a little bit off the track. What I'm saying is, I've only woken up a little while ago with the help of some friends, and I am quite open-minded, so it was relatively easy for me, and all of a sudden things started to make sense. But ever since I was a little kid, the Rothschild's name has raised alarm bells for me. I put the Rothman cigarettes and the pharmaceutical industry together a bit later on in my life, and I always wondered, how could you be so wealthy and not share with these nations in Africa? This was back when there was all sorts of famine and stuff going in Africa, and I couldn't understand why these, family like the Rothschilds, who had so much wealth at their disposals, wouldn't go in just for good PR and save a few million lives. I now understand why. It's pretty heavy stuff, but that's stuff that we can get down to down the track. So this has gone a bit longer than I expected. I'll put it out there because I'm sick of doing dry runs, and if you've got anything you want, I've got a few other things I'll go to next, but anything you want me to elaborate on, if I can, I will. If I can't, I'll try and point you in the right direction. Cheers, peeps. Peace, love, and prosperity. Keep your chins up. Good guys win. It's probably going to get a little worse. I can't see things getting much better until next year, and a lot's going to hinge on this US election, which is a fascinating study in and of itself. All right, peace out, homies.